y'all, I'm Dan Hamilton, Marine Corps veteran and host of the Next Gen Warrior Show. As always, the Next Gen Warrior Show is brought to you by Chairman George B. Bush and our dedicated staff at the Texas Veterans Land Board. Here at the Next Gen Warrior Show, we are proud to promote the success stories and the achievements of the military and veterans community while encouraging those who may be struggling. Joining me today for a conversation on entrepreneurship, innovation is Samantha Snabes. She is the CEO and co-founder of Re3D. Sam, thank you so much for being on the program with us today. How are you?
Good. Thanks so much for having me.
Absolutely. It's been a little unpredictable here in Texas and definitely here in Central Texas. So I hope you're warm. Hope you have running water and everything is hopefully getting back to some semblance of normalcy for you.
Yeah, we reopened the shop yesterday and caught up on a week of shutdown. My co-founder and I are really blessed. We got water back a couple days ago and are good to go. A number of our teammates didn't fare so well, so we're learning a lot about insurance claims and trying to support each other and the community as we hopefully have a drier and warmer rest of the year.
Yeah, no, I certainly second that. Before we get too far into our conversation about Re3D, 3D printing and kind of innovation that you are experiencing in the shop on a daily basis, tell us about your military service.
Sure. So I'm really blessed. I'm an officer in the Air National Guard, actually in the great state of Mississippi. So me, along with many others in our units, do the commute once a month and beyond to get to learn a little bit more about the good food of the Deep South and to support our homeland mission.
No, I'm glad to hear that. So tell us a little bit about dividing time, right? If you're dividing your time between your business, running your business, starting your business, obviously, I think in the last year or so, you've probably learned about pivoting in certain different situations with the pandemic, but you're also dividing your time and dedicating that to the military. How do you wear different hats, and do you enjoy doing it? And tell us about kind of just how you do it well.
Yeah, I mean, I don't know if I do it well, but things get done mainly out of necessity. I would definitely say when I first enlisted, I joined the military later in life. It was easier, and when I was a company grade officer, but and a lot of guardsmen will share this pain point as you ascend and rank and responsibility and teams get bigger and there's additional trainings you have to do or schoolhouses, it can be tough because I think there's a certain personality type that is probably selected to be an Air Force officer in my career field, and that same personality type wants to try and do everything well on the civilian side as well. And so it's ultimately comes down to time and to your point, and hopefully the dual hat has helped me learn how to manage my time better than I would have. But, it's not easy. There are definitely days I feel like I'm forcing a square peg in the round hole. I can distinctly remember 2 pitch competitions, one of which we won this giant foam check. And it was for Jack Daniels. So I'd taken like a whiskey shot or something for Gentleman Jack in San Francisco. And then I had to be the next day and wherever, I forget, and getting on a plane and trying to manage this huge check. And I had a bunch of clothes. We must have had some sort of ceremony. I think I had blues and my regular clothes and all these military bags. And I'm like running through the airport not to miss my flight. And then, right now I'm taking a pre-deployment course for a couple weeks, and I've got other life going on. And, so 2 nights ago, I had to pull an all-nighter to get some grants in for our business. But you make it work. And I think what does help is just trying to challenge yourself. In the Air Force, we say integrity first, just to be really transparent with your teams. And both teams, we could point to my efficiency and time management, but I'm very aware and very humbled that both on the Air Guard side and on the civilian side, there's a lot of people that help pick up the pieces when I leave a mess. I come through the factory sometimes in the middle of the night between things, and just in a complete tornado trying to pull things together and get things out. And there's a whole host of people that pick it up and give me a lot of grace.
Can I ask you why you joined the service?
I think you had a question too previously about whether or not I enjoy it. And I think, life is really short, and we have so many resources available to us in the United States. And I'm extremely bullish too on the state of Texas as a female entrepreneur and being a transplant. And I think you should only do what you love. So I do love both, and I'm very motivated by both, but I forgot what your question was.
All right, yeah. No, I'm glad to hear that you're bullish on Texas, because we feel the same way here. And there is so much innovation happening, especially here. I know you're part of DIU and Army Futures Command, and they're like you said, there's so much happening here in Texas. But I was interested to know why you joined the service. If you had this kind of idea and entrepreneurial spirit, what made you say, "Hey, I'm gonna go enlist, or I'm gonna go get my commission"?
Yeah, I think a couple things happened. It's definitely a longer conversation over beer, but I had gone through fire academy.
Episode 2 of this conversation.
Episode 2. We'll be with beer in person. So I had the opportunity. I was a volunteer firefighter through college and afterwards, and picked it up in Austin, and had the chance to go in EMT, had a chance to go through fire academy, and I really enjoyed that experience. About you're familiar with it, about a year long, and really liked riding out, while I was working at NASA and weekends here and there, and which is very similar to a reservist commitment. In parallel, when I had the opportunity to support NASA, there are a number of guardsmen in different senior level positions. So I learned about the Guard, and had briefly dated someone that was in it, and it just kind of was really attractive to me, and I was seeking something else. More importantly, when I was working in space life sciences, I learned a little bit about the astronaut selection, and knew that there was some bias towards people that held security clearances or had a military background. And I had, at that point, the first time I applied to be an astronaut, I was really young, barely qualified, because I'd happened to have a company at a young age, and had been rejected twice. And on that second time, I was like thinking a lot about what really inspired me in terms of space exploration and being an astronaut. And one thing that struck me was that many astronauts don't really spend that much time in space, or some don't even fly. But they do a lot of education and outreach. And I was someone in Detroit that really was a benefactor of that. And having come down to Texas at an early age with a life science company, and it's just like a mattress strapped to the roof of my car, and writing a bad check for the first month's rent, I was just really blown away by how many resources were available to me as a female entrepreneur, and not having family around. And I decided that, realistically, I wasn't ever going to be an astronaut. But being in the Air Force, I saw as one way of giving back and having that opportunity. And I shared this when I originally hired to be a flyer, and it didn't work out. But in the interview, I remember them asking, why I wanted to do it. And it came out of my mouth, and I'm sure made an impression on the board. But I realized, if you have a tiara on your head, or if you're wearing a flight suit, whether you're a pilot or you're an astronaut, you have the attention of anybody ages 3 to 99 for a short period of time, to say, every day is a choice, and we have so much opportunity. And that's something I take very seriously. And so it's an honor to wear the uniform here and there, and remind myself and get a chance sometimes to remind others that we're so privileged.
Well, I think you probably marked the first on the Next Gen Warrior show. I don't think we've had anybody say that they were trying to become an astronaut before. So that's I know you just slid that one in there. I know you probably thought you could get away with that, but why, was it from a young age that you were interested in aeronautics, I guess, and going to space, and then you actually started looking at the career field to say, how do I plug myself into that? How do I make this a reality?
Yeah, I've always wanted to be an astronaut. No one really knows why in my family. I'm sure it may be unique, and then I just kind of stuck with it because I'm really consistent and stubborn. But since I was a kid, people asked me what I wanted to do. I didn't even know what astronaut was, and I said up there. But I actually didn't have an interest in planes at all. Like I remember I would do sometimes camps, seminars, workshops. I'd get scholarships, went to space camp in Detroit, just different ways to, like, was in a Young Astronauts Club in another school district. I found different ways to connect to learning about space, and it just was always really thrilling to me. But then sometimes you'd get like flyers of like military planes, and like they try to give you some like history of aerospace, and I remember like I always throw those away and had like no interest. And my Viz Recce is still to this day is terrible, and I have to have like flashcards in my bathroom sink so I don't like make poor choices as an officer now. But but the along the way, there were some astronauts in the Detroit community, going back to education and outreach and just kind of the service, that Jack Lousma, Catherine Sullivan, Tony England, who gave a lot of their time and shared with me that so the other thing I would do is I would call up astronauts at home through the white pages, and when Prodigy became available,
find the number in the white pages and
because I go to space
calling astronauts.
Yeah, they have in space camp, they give you like a book, or they used to in the 80s, and then the end of it is like all the astronauts and where they're from, or where maybe they were working, I can't remember, but somehow, this I guess was the early analyst in me. I was like, I could find them and I'll call them. And it was so logical to me when I was like 8 to 12, and just say, hey, I'm going to be an astronaut someday. What do I have to do? And then a couple of them, I'm sure they got it all the time, but because I'm like calling them at dinner and stuff. But there was like one in particular. My mom like saved the voicemail on the answering machine in our trailer. She used to play it all the time for people, like, hey, this is Tony England. Samantha, I got your voicemail. And I'd love to meet you at University of Michigan. So they told me how to go to college.
Can I stop you real quick? How important was that call back to you? As a young girl, and you're reaching out to people and you get that positive reinforcement from someone who acknowledges you and wants to encourage you. What was the impact of that?
I think it meant a lot to my family. Like that one instance was cool because like my mom had this record of it and we kept it for
you still years. Have it?
Well, I think the answering machine is no longer
in operation. I was wondering if maybe that made its way onto digital.
I'm sure there's a tape somewhere. But yeah, I think every astronaut I ever connected with or got an introduction to spent time with me. So that was also really, really impressionable, but also like probably really formed like my commitment to service, and why I try to respond to people. Hopefully if someone messages me on LinkedIn after this, I'll get back to them eventually. But it's just, we're all at different stages of our life, and we're all broken and need each other in different ways. And it's just really fun to be able to intersect with the community as, they're taking decisions that will impact other lives. But so I was told I had to go to college, and then kind of took a long road to figure that out, but and how to support it. And then when I was in college, I guess on a couple breaks or between transferring schools, one of them, maybe when Jack Lousma said, you need to get the research experience. Like, you didn't join the military, which, I wish now someone would have pushed me in that direction, but I knew I actually got to college the first time, and they said, I thought I was gonna be an astrophysicist because one of the astronauts I talked to was, and they're like, what's your major gonna be? And like day one of orientation, I'm like, astrophysics. And they're like,
I gotta figure it out. That's what I'm gonna do.
We don't have that major. And I'm like, what's a major? And now what? And they're like, well, I was like, I guess it's science. And they're like, do you want to be a biologist? And I was like, sure. So I joined the biology cohort, but I kind of bumbled my way through it. And then partway through that, this kind of ultimately leads to how Re3D got started. To bring it full circle, I think it was Jeff Lousma. He said, you need to get some research experience. And unfortunately, at that point, I was kind of like going into like junior, senior year, what would have been my super senior years. And all those opportunities were taken, because you really need to identify earlier on in your college career to work with a professor. So through another volunteer program I was in, I got matched at this life science startup. Actually, now they're like a big deal. And in Ann Arbor, and they had gotten a grant. That's all I knew. I didn't know it was a DARPA grant. And they were in a phase 1, but the technology was a little bit competitive actually to what they did. So it's kind of segmented off. They had done it because I think they wanted to get a confocal microscope or something. And it wasn't doing so well. But what was interesting, so along this whole time too, I've been in 4-H. I started a 4-H club. I was mentoring kids in Detroit, and doing all the things you learn in 4-H. And what had happened is they were growing these stem cells. Stem cells was like a new field on felt. Well, I knew from sewing Halloween costumes and doing 4-H that a lot of the felt has a silver ion on it, because they would always label it like safe for kids at Joann Fabrics. Huh. So I get hired as a part-time college student, and then I end up working full-time while I'm still in college to round out this grant, and realize, or I question if maybe the cells were dying because there's a silver ion. And of course, that turns into like a big deal, and the Army comes up, and we get a phase 2 award to continue it, because as soon as we got surgical grade felt without a silver ion, the cells started growing really well. So we made this artificial immune system. We grew cells in 3D. And then I kind of got shuffled away into a side lab, and the leadership of the company, when we made it to phase 2, we were eligible for phase 3, and I didn't know what that was, said, they would support us getting an exclusive worldwide license to commercialize the technology and have a business at like 22 or 23. And I'd always because I didn't know really what I was doing. I was always really proud of being like under budget, and most people spend all the money in a grant.
You like the hustling aspect of it?
I had a schedule. I didn't even know what it was. I didn't know what DARPA was. So yeah, we made it to phase 3 commercialization, and just as recession was hitting in Detroit, started that company, and I ended up in Texas because that was a really dark time, especially for the economy and with the housing crisis in Michigan. And we knew the life science venture, you'd be fundraising, and had like a Fortune 50 customer right away. And so I sent a fax to every state, I think it was 6 or 7, that didn't have state income tax, to the governor's office. I'd found that on the internet too, and was like, so I have this company, and things are not good here. I hear you don't have state income tax. Do you have any incentives? And someone in David Dewhurst's office in the state of Texas assigned a case agent, brought us down, rolled out the red carpet. I think I met the mayor of San Antonio and Georgetown and Katie. And they never looked twice at my partner, my former boss at the company, was 63 and I was 23. I'm sure we were an odd couple. And they never cited us for not having a PhD. And I think they'd set us up with free rent and accelerator and, all the things that were just starting at the time for technology companies. And Texas was very committed to diversifying their portfolio, and they saw life science as part of it. And that's how I ended up here.
So tell us about that, I guess that jump or that maturation between the time that you are here in Texas, you have the business, it's starting to grow. But one of the most interesting things I'm interested in learning from you and your personal experience is growing the company through fundraising. And you have done pitches all around the world, selling your technology, selling your business plan, selling yourself. And what have you learned through that process of getting up even just a room of maybe 5 or 10 people to being in a room of several hundred or 1,000, pitching this idea to those people?
Yeah, I think you can watch a lot of webinars and get a lot of feedback, but having, tried to fundraise for the first company, which we weren't successful in because we ended up just selling the company outright, which was great. And that's when my friends at NASA I'd met through an experiment I'd written in college, invited me to work for them. And then I became an entrepreneur within NASA and open innovation. And we were kind of selling within the agency and different campuses as well, this concept of innovation and open data and citizen science and kind of these new ways of doing business. But what I've learned both from that side of the fence, trying to fundraise the first company, and now Re3D is a bootstrap social enterprise. So we do a lot of pitch competitions and grants to support that focus is, you can present to one person and they'll critique you and they'll give you advice. Or if you message me on LinkedIn and I listen to your pitch, and then the next person may have a completely different perspective. But what seems to have served me well, and some of the companies that we mentor, is when you're just authentic and you're consistent. So, I think, there's a lot of, schools of thought on like the content of your slide deck or what needs to be in your presentation. But ultimately, at the end of the day, I think what people are listening for, especially now, and people see so many pitches all the time that might be, rating you or giving you resources. What they will remember is if that conversation was like a handshake, if there was trust, if it was believable, and if they think that you really have it. And now that, we have the privilege of mentoring a lot of companies, you recognize it early on when someone is like, they are going to make it happen or die trying. And I think that's what's so important.
Was that something that you had to learn, or do you think that that was something that you had because you had an idea that was going to work and you had the talent to do it?
Yeah, I think for me, I fall into the bucket, I think, of accidental entrepreneurs. Whether it was wanting to be an astronaut.
Entrepreneurs?
Accidental.
Accidental, okay.
It's kind of cool now. Like, we speak in programs and there's students that they say they want to be an entrepreneur and they're kind of figuring out like what business they're going to have to be one. For me, like, life just kind of happened. Like, I wanted to be an astronaut and need to figure out what I had to do in order to complete the form. And then, which, by the way, you apply through USA Jobs, which is always amusing to me. And then I had to learn how to figure out how to get to college and pay for it and pay for student loans. And then I had to learn how to do the first company, which I was completely clueless on. Like, that was just kind of fell in my lap.
Right.
But it was a serious business. And then my job at NASA, I had to figure out, how we're going to do all these things that were kind of a new way of doing business within the federal government. And then the same thing with the business now. We're kind of breaking all the rules, being bootstrapped, being socially driven, being open source, making the machines ourselves with dirty fingernails and in the US. So that's a long answer to say, I think for me, I was just always kind of focused on the problem, and I gave it to the community to help me figure out how to solve it, because I think our approach has been, unlike many other people, and I think this is a difference sometimes I'll say between female and male entrepreneurs, I don't know if that's true, is we've kind of always come at it as like, here's what we don't know. Is there anyone in your network? Or do you have any feedback for us? And, honestly, I do get a lot of feedback that sometimes I'm like, that's the old way of doing business, or I know I'm not going to follow it, but it's still good because that's someone's perception of how you presented yourself.
Right.
And I need to, we need to be malleable enough to either figure out how to redo our messaging if it's off target, or how to relate to that audience that, there might be a chasm with that we need to figure out how to bridge. So that's the second piece of advice. I say, authenticity is really important. The other thing that I've never shied from, and this is a tension and with hardware entrepreneurs, is we have this line, we say it's okay to be ugly. And we embrace it, because I think there's a tendency when you have an idea to really try and get it right and then show it and show like this perfect form and present all the best things. But anyone you're pitching to in a pitch environment knows you have got a long way to go. So we've been, our approach has been to be like, we'll say we'll put the turd on the table, but also, like, if it's a crappy picture because we didn't have time to Photoshop our hardware and the electrical box and the wires are on the floor, like in our first Kickstarter campaign, we'll show it to the community and say, with your support, we can actually make this look less like a donkey.
Dress that up a little bit, yeah.
Yeah, so I think that has served us really well. And, I think social entrepreneurs have a little bit easier because when people buy into your mission, they really do want to help, and you're giving them a way to help. And so we see anyone that we pitch to that either votes for us in a competition or gives us money on Kickstarter or, judges us, we see them as micro investors in our company, and we try to treat them like that. So I think, it comes down to like not only just knowing your audience, but positioning yourself in a way that you can allow people to buy in and to recognize their contribution.
So I think we have gotten so far into this conversation, but I don't even think I allowed you the opportunity to tell our audience what Re3 does. I just realized that in the middle of talking about it and in talking about the process of doing it, what is the solution that you guys are actually providing?
Yeah, so when we were at NASA, we were volunteering with Engineers Without Borders, NASA Johnson Space Center at night. And then my last role as a contractor there was a social entrepreneur in residence for NASA headquarters. So we're thinking a lot about access and opportunity, and
access and opportunity to what?
To solve your own problems or economic independence. And that's something I think about a lot too in my Air Force role. And then which, I kind of started that process at the same time I joined NASA. So they've always been parallel themes, but we decided, my co-founder is a farmer from Iowa. His family still manages a centennial farm. One of my first jobs I got paid to do was in a factory in Detroit. My family still works on the line and in the shops. We are very aware of like the decline of like manufacturing and like jobs where you work with your hands in the U.S. And how many, the upside that provides to communities. So anywho, we came up with this idea for the world's largest affordable industrial 3D printer, which allows you to make, we say, things at a human scale, so things you would use, not just like a toy. So it starts at 2-foot cubed and now goes as big as a shipping container. And then with the community support, once we did that, then we had this greater vision of making the feedstock more accessible. And one way we saw to do that was by allowing the 3D printer to use plastic garbage. So we can do that through printing with pellets, which are like form factors already used in other equipment like injection molding machines.
So that's a recycled product that your printers are able to use and then produce. Yeah,
this is medical waste actually from Holland. I have here on my desk in this measuring cup, Christmas cookies. And then, but we can also print with flake. So this is like ground up water bottles directly. And so we're one of the first machines that can print with flake or pellets or filament. So basically most of the common form factors that polymer printers take, and it can print from virgin materials or recyclables. And we're in over 50 countries now. And, it's as we were, I was monologuing earlier, it's not always pretty or seamless, and we definitely have a long way to go. Garbage is a big field, so is just polymer chemistry in general, but it's a really fun space to play in that's always evolving.
So when you think about the concept of trying to provide, a solution for economic independence of, countries around the world who may not have access to either capital or resources to create their own economic independence or provide for their communities, to the scale that you're at now, is the arc where you thought you were going? Like where you're at now, is that where you thought you were going several years ago?
Well, my 3-year-old self thought I'd be an astronaut on the International Space Station.
The arc's changed a little bit, huh, in the process.
And with 3D, because the first venture was 3 years at the startup where we developed it, 3 years when we had the company. I was at NASA like 3-4 years, or supporting NASA, and then I had assumed like at 3 years, I guess, like I'll no longer be with 3D, and maybe I'll be doing something related to the military or firefighting, or maybe I'll be an astronaut. But so the timeline is never quite what you think, like, but the intent has stayed the same. So it's still exciting, it's still interesting, it still feels relevant to us. We said in the beginning, if this, we basically make a tool, and if it became commonplace and it's open source, we hope other people make it too. And we weren't needed because we think the people that have the best answers are probably people in the communities that are using the product. And so if we wrote ourselves out of a company or a job, we were okay with that. But right now, and part of the reason we don't sell out and we haven't taken a large round of investment is we like the independence, because there's a lot of risk. It's really, really hard. It's not pretty. And we still think there's a lot of work to be done. And so for us, this is a really exciting place to be. The garbage is so cool. Everyone has waste. Sustainability is starting to become a conversation in the US. And even with COVID and supply chains being disrupted, there's a lot of conversation now about, why so much manufacturing is offshored, why supply chains are so long around the world, and like few businesses or countries or economic models support them, and how maybe that can evolve to create honest jobs and, more importantly, allow people economic independence. So I'm still really committed to it.
No, I'm glad you said that, because one of the things that I was kind of interested to get your insight on was this Vice video, and I didn't get to watch the entire thing, but it's a video by the media company Vice, and it says 3D printing is changing the world.
So I'm about to 3D print a human ear.
Yeah, and I wanted to know, as somebody who is in this space, 3D people are 3D printing homes now. My wife and I just watched a video about somebody 3D printing steak. I'm not sure that I would put that on my plate. As a born and raised Texan, I prefer the real thing. But 3D printing, the innovation that's happening there, the ability to scale it, like you said, and take it around the world, is really incredible. And you really are on the cutting edge of a lot of awesome innovation. Can you tell me what that's been like?
Yeah, it's humbling, and loosely you can make categories, and this is what investors or people you pitch to will hate, because one of the harder sells with our type of technology is it is broad-based. Everyone uses it. It's like making a wrench or a 2D printer. Like, you can say loosely this size of business or whatever will buy it, but you can't intentionally, we want it to be a broad-based technology, because people basically are taking what's in their head and then they're translating it, and everyone's unique. So that's been a really interesting adventure. And then when you add this opportunity to potentially use waste, it gets even more complex, because waste streams, how it's collected, sorted, type differs. And actually, the biggest opportunity is not consumer waste like we originally thought. It's manufacturing waste. So in Austin, Texas alone, I have 2,000 pounds of the material that's left over from when your driver's license, and actually most of the ID cards around the world, or my military CAT card is stamped out of this plastic polycarbonate sheet. Comes from a company called HID Global. The skeleton that remains, 2,000 pounds of that every 10 days goes to the Austin landfill. It's clean, it's typed, it's virgin, they know the formulation, and then Austin, on top of that, we're not considered what's called a producer city. So there's not a lot of manufacturing, and there's tons of people that want to be entrepreneurs that have great ideas that maybe can make local goods, right? So, that's just one very, very small example of a waste stream here, even here in Texas, that is going from the manufacturer to landfill at cost unsustainably. So any opportunity to even work with strategics or manufacturers has a huge upside. Some of them, want to make very non-sexy things like pallets, or in Puerto Rico, where we have an office in San Juan, pharmaceutical companies are looking at making GDP compliant bins, or a few $1,000s each. Everything has to be super standardized in those factories. As they scale into all new lines, they have to buy them and bring them into an island. Why not, incite a business in Puerto Rico where someone's taking their own waste to make their own bins, to save them money and to stimulate the local economy. So there, the business models all around the world are really different. And again, I'm rambling loosely, but I think the theme is it's all really unique and hyper applicable. But what you do is you start with like one idea that you have on what could be used in the community or with a certain type of company. And then usually within a couple months or a few conversations, what the technology is really going to be used for, and the real opportunity is something like you never envisioned once all the stakeholders get involved.
Yeah, that's what I was kind of interested by, the trajectory, the arc of your of the maturation of the idea, the maturation of the business plan, the maturation of the opportunities. It ends up actually becoming, when it's all said and done, it actually ends up becoming something totally different. But it has provided you different opportunities. And one thing I kind of wanted to drill down onto a little bit was this opportunity in waste, right? Like I guess I don't know a whole lot about this. So theoretically, you would close the gap in the life cycle of a product, right? So if the life cycle of product is you source the material, you create the product is used, and then it goes into the landfill and you never see it again. But if you can close that loop where it no longer goes to a landfill, it goes to Sam's warehouse where then it's put into a picture frame, or you use the plastic to build computers, then you kind of close that loop. You create sustainability, you produce jobs, and you make the environment around you much cleaner and much more sustainable.
Yeah, and what we hadn't realized is in the production steps of sourcing the raw materials to make that good, or even the process of making the good, that's creating waste too. That's also going to landfill. So we've started working more upstream, which is tough. And if anyone's listening to this, we're always looking for warm intros to strategics. What's fascinating is a lot of the big brands don't even know how much garbage they create because of like the way they're structured, and then the contractors they work with and their own division, and the information around waste isn't aggregated. Some companies are starting to do that now. And then, there's a big risk and overhead for them to investigate how they pull back some of that waste stream to then pursue what might be an opportunity that could change their workflow or the way they're structured that has significant cost. So particularly in the US, this has been a challenge with a lot of, I think, conversation, even in developing countries, because they have kind of like you saw with cell phones in Africa, the opportunity or smartphones to leapfrog in certain communities. And then, in Europe, particularly in the Netherlands, they're so advanced and really thinking through these new business models. But right now we find ourselves splitting our time between doing a lot of grunt work, grinding up waste, testing it, evolving the printer, and then also sitting in a lot of with COVID, virtual boardroom discussions where it'll take a number of meetings to get to the right person within a company that's willing to start to investigate where there might be an upside, either internally or in one of their community partnership programs or relationships with the university.
So let me kind of take this in a little bit more of a, I guess, strategic or leadership direction. You just talked about having virtual board meetings, and these conversations that are like we are having now are remote. What have you learned about maybe leadership and how to continue to move Re3D forward with so many of the disruptions that we've experienced in the last 12 months?
Yeah, first I would say, I realize we're really blessed. A lot of people just, life happened and it's really upset their ability to sell or the product they deliver, how they get it to their customer. We are so fortunate that a lot of the things that, we've really, frankly struggled with, or, why we've had to pitch so much and hustle so hard, were not as common themes in the US. So the open source thing, not the most accepted business model. Social entrepreneurship is just not favored as much. We've always had a very diverse team since our inception, and that makes us a little bit of an outlier, especially being in manufacturing. There's just kind of old ways and demographics around how business gets done. Doing US-based manufacturing, we got hit up a lot for that in the beginning because it didn't make financial sense, or we couldn't have made things cheaper in another way. And then this vision to use garbage that is very complicated. We've only touched on some of the complexities of it and getting access to it and working with it in a broad-based platform that we've discussed, and an unproven market. No one really knows who the biggest users of garbage printers are going to be. I give you lots of little antidotes and people that are buying it right now around the world and trying it in new ways. But what has been fascinating for us with COVID is all of those things suddenly became very appealing, even in the US. So, now there's a lot of talk about how encouraging small business might, in new business models and entrepreneurship may be needed when the job market's so tight right now to create jobs. And US-based manufacturing is really important, and sustainability and ways of sharing data and open models of collaboration. So I think for us, somehow, and this has happened to us a couple times in our history, we got really lucky that all the things that we were sticking to, that we've been consistent on for 8 years, and there's a lot of videos online and talks we've given and pitches we've given where people are like, yeah, those guys
prototyping to 3D print from trash.
That shit crazy, but they're still doing it. And now we have metrics, like people are writing papers and putting data behind it. And like they've seen garbage get printed, and the National Science Foundation has been an amazing partner as well. So for us, I think last year was about consistency. The other blessing is, you know, I'm not ashamed. I don't do this as much anymore. We definitely did it in the first couple of years, but there were some trade shows, like we didn't have the resources to exhibit in. We kind of snuck in. Sometimes when you pitch, you get to exhibit. But I think then the exhibitors assume like you have stuff to exhibit. So in the early days, or you have the equipment, and then you got to like get it all there, and there's fees with the unions, and it's cost prohibitive for a company. So there were a couple times like I stole the trash cans from other halls and turned them upside down and put a trash bag liner over it, and that was the podium for my 3D print. Or hawked a chair from the press room.
And you know, we used to call that adapt and overcome, right?
Yeah, and so because I mean, the prints were expensive enough to bring them in or to try and smuggle them on the plane. Like we didn't have the resources, and we got, you know, we put signs on our back, and I wear the flight suit too, just because I can stick all I have pockets and I put things in, so I don't have to buy the holders Lexan holders that'll break. And we got really creative. I'd walk around with this huge 3D printed surfboard, traveled around the world with, and just get people to put their sticker on it or sign it or to take selfies just so they would promote us. I mean, it was pretty grassroots, but so you pair us next to, you know, some of our peers in this space, and we're friends with them, have raised, you know, 40 million to even more dollars in funding. So they've got all the bells and whistles, you know, and their booths look awesome. And then there's ours. With COVID, however, everything moved online. At first, there was a lot of it. Now I think people are like finding a regular routine. But I get a table on Remo, which is like a virtual platform to network. And a lot of times, because of, you know, all the things that make us relevant right now, we get the free one, so we don't pay for it. And I go online, I'm wearing my hoodie, and I've got my Constellation wallpaper. We did it with the interns during COVID. And I'm just like the companies that have raised $40 million. And we only can have 6 seats at the table. And so, you know, Fortune 50 will enter the room and we'll have a conversation, and I'll add them to LinkedIn. And, you know, because of stuff we've done, we got a bunch of followers and we seem legit, and we have a website. So what's so cool is it's normalized everybody.
Right.
And so you can get the message across. So things you've been consistent on, you know, if you work to your point on pitching, to be very clear, very sincere, very authentic, very direct, and we're very aggressive and say, who can we talk to in your business to do X, Y, and Z? We're looking for a paid strategic pilot, or now that we've done a few grants, you know, we're working on X, Y, and Z grant that may relate to them. We'd love a letter of support. And you can get right to the point and find a way to continue that conversation after that first 5-minute exchange in a way that I never could have done pre-COVID with my little trash can and a storm trash can in the chair.
Trash cans in the jumpsuit. I love that.
Yeah.
The flight suit. So a couple more things that I'm really interested to hit on too is you mentioned the demographics of industrial or waste management companies, probably not a whole lot of female-led companies in that space. You talked about in the beginning, obviously you're very interested in STEM and becoming an astronaut. Not a whole lot of females in that space as well. Have you seen that change over the last couple of years? And what have conversations been like with young women who are interested in starting businesses or maybe going into industrial or waste management?
Yeah, so in my first business in life science, the startup I worked at, I guess when I was at that company, there were a lot of women, which now I realize might have been unique. And then it was just me and my partner, so we were a co-led team with the first company. I realize now, especially then, how unique it must have been and why everyone was like, oh, let's just over talk. This is fun. And I didn't have a PhD, which I should have had, but I didn't know better. And then, you know, I was given a lot of authority and autonomy when I was at NASA Johnson and NASA headquarters. It wasn't till this venture in this that people, this gender conversation around gender started coming up, and I looked around, I'm like, oh, I might have been the only person in that class in college, or yeah, I never saw a female investor when I was, you know, pitching the Goose Society in Houston and all these groups, you know. And when I was at NASA, you know, we would get to speak to the maker movement. We also like judge the Rice Business Plan competition and whatnot. And looking around, I'm like, yeah, there weren't a lot of women. And I realized all the people that approached us for mentoring and feedback in the early years, they were all men. So now I'm more sensitive to it, and do realize in the last couple years I get a lot of inquiries from women that want to enter manufacturing and sustainability, and so I think for me, I don't know if I'm just like I have thick skin, or I just always have my what do they call it in the Air
Blinders
Force?
on.
Yeah, my optimistic bias on.
Your
and just
lens.
moving through life. But I've also always had a co-led team wherever I've been. So I think I've been super sheltered. I would say now that we've been fishing, I wish I'd been more attuned to that early on. We're going into our 8th year.
Yeah.
When I was fishing for introductions to like bigger strategics, and as our client base now, is up through Fortune 100s around the world, and every continent but Antarctica, we're still trying to get there. There's a very consistent demographic of a person I'm talking to that is very different background than myself, and usually also is their families may have been like really well resourced, and they're really well networked and went to all the best schools and have those, and that is not a background I have, and so I'm learning as a human being like how to make sure that I'm relatable to that context, but also becoming aware that has created a divide, and anything that we can do to get more divergent thought into those rooms is really helpful. So, honestly, I didn't notice it. I am aware of it now because people pointed it out, and it is kind of like now that we're
solving problems, huh?
Even my co-founder were like, dang, there are a lot of old white men that we talk to. But I never realized it. And Google thinks I'm a much older white male as well, when the things I search for and what I do. And so that just affirms it. But I do think it's changing. I think there's a lot of resources out there now. And the cool thing is, because it suddenly became cool to work with women, my co-founder and I are aware that maybe we're getting some of the introductions that he would have had a hard time getting before. But we're just like, man, we need to own it while we can.
Step up. Yeah. When the door opens, go through it, huh?
Yeah.
So last question that I have for you, and I appreciate you taking the time to be with us today and really talk about your passions in Read 3D and the great work that you guys are doing. Is there maybe one thing that we did not get to hit on today during our conversation, or a message you would like to leave, veterans or entrepreneurs before we close it out here today?
Yeah, so I would say the things that I feel like helped us that hopefully will help another veteran. First of all, if you need assistance, there's a great resource called Bunker Labs. They've saved our heinies more than once, especially when our factory was hit by a hurricane when I was deployed, and then our office in Puerto Rico. So please take advantage of veterans, Bunker Labs, excuse me. They have a ton of resources. If you have any specific questions, don't hesitate. Hit me up on LinkedIn. We'll get you over to the right group. If you are a small business owner right now, we know this, while we've been really fortunate, it's really tough, and there's been a lot of expenditure that businesses have had to shelter as a result of COVID. We were given $100,000 from Barclays for a program called PPE for the People. So to basically help disadvantaged and minority-owned businesses, which you qualify for as a veteran, please reach out to us, PPE for the People with Impact Hub. We would love to provide you PPE for free. That's a resource that we have that is aimed at working where you are, whether you need splash guards, we know that's expensive and hard to source, or face shields or anything else. And then finally, I would say, this is the best time. And I think even the DoD is recognizing just the demand and the hunger that vets have for starting businesses, and the success rate that we have that is really phenomenal compared to non-veteran led companies. So know that you have years of training and schooling and expertise that is so primed to start a company, and I look forward to seeing where you go.
Absolutely. Well, Sam, thank you so much again for being on the program with us today and talking about your career and where Read 3D is going. And we wish you much success and continued success in the future.
Thank you so much for your time. Have a great day.
Absolutely. On behalf of Chairman George P. Bush and our dedicated staff here at the Texas Veterans Land Board, we will be back here again next Monday to continue to encourage you and promote the successes and the achievements of the military and veterans community. We'll talk to you then.
Follow us on Instagram at Voices of Vets, on Twitter at Voice of Veterans, and on Facebook at facebook.com/Voices of Veterans. To hear more, please visit voicesofveterans.org. Join us in sharing the success stories of Texas veterans. Thank you for joining us for the Next Gen Warrior podcast.